Forest spirits. The overcast sky cast a dull light over the snow-covered forest as Debbie stepped onto her cabin porch, listening to the faint wind. Her heartbeat quickened and she gripped the lantern tighter. She hesitated, torn between caution and empathy. The sound felt too human, raw, and vulnerable, edged with pain or fear. It beckoned her to approach. Her mind hurried, recalling past encounters with the wilderness's dangerous unpredictability. Was it an injured creature, a lost traveler, or something darker? The whimper grew louder and more desperate from beyond the thick bushes. Debbie's instincts pushed her forward, yet she paused behind a low shrub, peering through tangled branches. Through her lantern's faint glow, she saw movement, a small trembling figure curled in the snow, shivering badly. Its shape was unclear at first, but then became obvious, a tiny animal, maybe a young fox or stray dog with fur-stained dark patches. Its breathing was uneven, its eyes wide and shiny with pain. Her breath caught as compassion overwhelmed her. She knew wounds in this cold could be deadly without immediate help. The soft gasp confirmed it. This was no ordinary distressed animal. It was suffering and helpless. Debbie moved cautiously, kneeling and reaching out to the trembling creature. It flinched, eyes filled with terror and pain. She saw a deep wound along its side, blood seeping out. Her heart tight, and this was more than a minor injury. It was life-threatening. She debated whether to leave it or risk her safety to help. Remembering her healing days, she gently touched the side, feeling the feverish heat beneath damp fur and whispering soothing words. She pulled out a small vial of herbal tincture from her coat pocket, knowing it might save its life. Carefully, she wrapped her arms around the fragile being, applying the tincture with delicate fingers as her eyes remained alert for worsening signs. Suddenly, a rustling behind made her tense. She turned slowly and scanned shadows. The wind moved branches, but she saw a small frantic movement just beyond her sight, perhaps. Another animal nearby attracted by noise. Debbie's thoughts raced. Was this predator attracted by blood, or was it another injured animal seeking help? She carefully grasped the tiny creature, senses alert. Moving slowly to avoid scaring it, she gently placed it in her coat for warmth and retreated toward the cabin, listening and watching. A sudden branch snap reminded her of nearby danger. Reaching safety, she hurried inside, tending to the injured animal with care and gathering supplies, driven by a new sense of purpose to protect this fragile life. As the fire sparked in the hearth, she gazed out the window, already planning her next move. The forest mysteries had deepened, and she realized her understanding of its risks and her place within it had just grown. The silence was no longer just stillness, but a warning, signaling that our exploration of darker truths was only beginning. By nightfall, Debbie's world had subtly changed. She discovered a wounded creature, a lurking predator, and renewed hope. Her knowledge expanded, sharpening her purpose. The forest's icy indifference persisted, but now she saw herself as part of its ongoing story, committed to protecting the helpless in shadows. Debbie moved carefully through the snow-covered woods, breath visible in the cold winter air. The quiet was nearly suffocating, broken only by faint creaks of frozen branches and her measured footsteps. Every sense was alert. Her eyes darted among shadows cast by sparse trees, while her ears searched for movement. She pulled her coat tighter, instinct urging concealment, yet her gaze kept returning to the trembling figure beneath her hands. Kneeling beside the injured pup, its tiny body trembled with shock and pain. Its fur was torn, blood seeped from jagged wounds. The frantic shivering reminded Or of its vulnerability. Debbie's fingers touched the torn fabric, feeling the sticky warmth of blood and uneven texture of injury. A soft whimper came from the pup, trembling and muffled, pulling at Debbie's conscience. She found this scene unexpectedly an abandoned rusted trap hidden under snow and leaves, jaws still clamped on a fragile limb. Her eyes widened with horror. The animal's pleading gaze searched hers silently, begging for aid. Debbie's heart tightened. She knew she couldn't leave it to perish. Driven by compassion and necessity, she took her pocket knife, its blade catching faint sunlight through branches. After a brief hesitation, she slipped the cold metal beneath the latch and carefully pried it open with a sharp screech. The jaws loosened, releasing the pup's leg with a loud snap. She gently lifted the tiny creature, holding it close to prevent escape. The pup jerked violently, claws digging into her coat as it tried to withdraw. She refused to let go. Her mind raced. What if nearby pack members sensed her mercy and attacked? Still, leaving the pup was unthinkable. Her life now depended on her care for the animal. She reached into her coat pocket for antiseptic and a clean cloth, trembling as she applied the solution to its wound. The bubbling liquid and pungent smell signaled her urgency. She quickly dabbed at the bleeding, the pup softly whimpering and seeking reassurance. Debbie's grip grew tighter around the fragile creature as her heart pounded with worry. Recognizing the cold's danger, she crafted a bandage from her scarf and gently wrapped the injured leg, then held it close to her chest, feeling its heartbeat beneath her hand. Every second mattered to avoid detection or attack, a chilly windmate or shiver as shadows lurked behind trees and sounds seemed louder an owl's call, snow cracking under branches. Her thoughts raced with choices. Should she go deeper into the woods for shelter or find a nearby safe place? The threat of predators was real, but leaving the pup behind was not an option. Suddenly, she caught a faint sound, a distant snap or rustle, making her tense instinctively. Her eyes searched the shadows for movement as she softly whispered to the pup, trying to keep calm despite her pounding heart. The forest was eerily silent, seemingly waiting for her next move. She adjusted her coat and prepared to carry the fragile bundle away at any sign of danger. Her mind considered whether to move into thicker cover or find a vantage point to observe unseen. Every choice involved risk, but hesitation was impossible. Her determination grew stronger. She would protect this life regardless of the peril. Carefully and deliberately, she shifted position, staying alert for signs of pursuit. The snow muffled her footsteps, but her ears caught every sound, a distant owl call and faint ice cracks. She knew she couldn't remain long in this spot. Prolonged stay increased the risk of detection by the pack or predators. Her senses heightened. She moved purposefully to find a safer hiding spot. As she started to withdraw, a sudden sound made or stop, perhaps a branch broke under snow or a distant howl. She tightened her hold on the pup, holding her breath. Whispering softly, she looked around the darkness for danger. The woods grew quiet again, yet the unease persisted. Moving slowly but steadily, she pressed forward, burdened by her choice. She understood her act of kindness might soon be exposed, and that danger lurked ahead. Still, her resolve remained firm. She would not leave this helpless creature today. At last, she reached a thicker thicket with deeper snow and darker shadows. Pausing to listen carefully, she gently placed the bundle into a hollow at the roots and covered it with snow and leaves. Her gaze stayed on the tiny form before she straightened up, preoccupied with her next step. She had given the pup a chance, delicate but real. As she slipped back into the shadows, a cold wind-carried snowy scent to her nose. She knew there wasn't much time left. Her senses were keen, her heart racing with fear and determination. She learned today that even winter's harshness can't extinguish hope. Moving deeper into the forest, her shadow blending with night, she carried this lesson forward. Debbie sat quietly in her cabin, shadows flickering from the dying fire on wooden walls, while outside silence and wind whispered among the trees. The cold bit through the walls, but she focused on the small trembling pup against her chest, blood-matted fur fragile in her hands. She gently brushed snow from its coat, each breath a fragile miracle of survival. The fire's faint glow flickered on her tense face as shadows danced beyond the window, whispers hinting at unseen dangers outside. Suddenly, a faint scent, a mix of damp earth and something sharper, drifted in the air. Debbie's senses heightened. She pressed her ear to the door, listening carefully. Outside, nothing stirred but silent darkness where only occasional wind moans hinted at lurking threats nearby. A faint rustling near the porch caused her to freeze suddenly. She instinctively tightened her grip on the battered flashlight and turned it on, its narrow beam piercing the darkness. Shadows danced across the porch and nearby trees. Her eyes shifted to the makeshift weapon, a sturdy, sharpened stick she'd found earlier, clenching it out of habit, despite knowing it might not be enough. The wind gusted abruptly, bringing a sharper, smell-damp earth mixed with metallic tang that made her stomach tighten. Her breath hitching, she looked back at the window, where a shadow flickered quickly just beyond her sight. Her heartbeat pounded loudly in her ears as she steadied trembling hands, trying to suppress panic. Pressing her ear to the door again, she listened intently for sounds of movement. Silence hung heavy and oppressive. Only her shallow breathing and the faint creak of the cabin broke it. Every muscle tensed as she strained to detect any sign of danger. A sudden crack from overhead made her flinch, an old branch snapping under wind's weight, and her grip on the stick tight and even more. Shadows outside seemed to shift as her eyes briefly caught movement, something moving just beyond the window. She hesitated, weighing whether to stay silent and hope it passes or call out, risking exposure. Her instincts urged caution, but concern for the pup made her consider action. Moving closer to the door, her hand hovered over the latch while she listened carefully. The wind howled louder, rattling walls and making the cabin tremble as darkness outside appeared alive, an unseen force in the forest. She wondered if it was an animal scenting blood, a lost traveler, or something more sinister lurking nearby. Suddenly, a slow scraping noise came from the porch, deliberate and faint. Debbie froze, heart pounding heavily as she tightened her grip on the stick and stifled a gasp with her hand. The sound continued, like something heavy being dragged or shifted, making her stare at the latch, torn between locking it tighter or preparing for attack. In that moment of uncertainty, she saw movement again, closer, this time just beyond the window. Her heartbeat pounded loudly in her ears, each pulse a reminder of her vulnerability. She instinctively reached for her weapon, trembling slightly as she gripped it tightly. Her eyes darted between the door and the shadows outside, her mind racing. Time stretched endlessly, every second feeling fragile like a thread holding her in place. The wind howled again, louder and more violent, rattling the cabin and causing it to shudder. Outside, the forest seemed alive and watching, waiting breathlessly. Debbie's thoughts grew sharper. Stay silent and hope they move on or shout and risk detection, but scare them off. Her concern for her pup's fragile life pushed her to act, yet instincts warned her of danger. At last, she decided. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped away from the door and pressed her ear against the wood again. Her voice was low yet firm. "Who's there?" Words faded into the night, swallowed by the heavy silence. No response came, only a distant, mournful wolf howling through the woods, reminding her of the wild just beyond her shelter. Her eyes narrowed, muscles tense. She realized she couldn't ignore the potential danger nearby, either from the forest or an unknown intruder. Her grip on the stick tightened further, knuckles pale. Questions raced through her mind. Should she wait and remain vigilant, hoping it passes, or prepare to defend herself, risking a confrontation? The shadows outside shifted once again, and she understood plainly that her quiet refuge was no longer safe. Something watched her silently from the darkness. In that moment, Debbie saw that her vigilance was her only protection. Whatever was out there, beast or man, would reveal itself soon enough. She had to be ready for whatever came next, no matter the risk. Her eyes darted between the door and shadows, senses alert for any movement. The night held its breath. She realized her solitude was fragile and fleeting. The forest quiet was misleading, concealing dangers ready to strike at any moment. She knew her survival depended on sharpening her awareness. The puppy whimpered softly, a delicate reminder of what's at risk. As the wind picked up again, Debbie clenched her weapon tighter, heart pounding with each beat, warning her. She understood long ago that threats often arrive unexpectedly from shadows we least suspect. Tonight, she was no longer merely waiting, she was prepared to face anything emerging from darkness. Seeing movement again closer and more deliberate, she held her breath. The forest seemed alive, observing her and testing her courage. She straightened with tense muscles, ready for whatever might appear. Her mind was focused, her peaceful refuge had become a battlefield of shadows and whispers. In that instant, Debbie realized her only true defense was constant vigilance, unyielding awareness. Whatever lurked outside, beast or man, would reveal itself soon, and she must be ready to face it with determination and bravery, no matter what dawn brought. The howling wind grew stronger as icy gusts swept around the tiny cabin, snow swirling wildly. Outside, the trees shook violently, their bare branches groaning beneath the storm. Debbie rushed to the door, her breath forming fleeting clouds in the cold air. Her trembling fingers grasped the rough wood and pushed hard to open it slightly. The old latch squeaked, but she forced it, stuffing a torn wool blanket into the crack for a quick seal. She knew it wouldn't last long, but it was all she could do now. A shiver ran through her, more from cold than fear, as she realized the storm was worsening. Darkness quickly hid the landscape, shadows merging into black beyond the fragile shelter. Grabbing her lantern, she fumbled to light it with shaky hands. Its flickering flame illuminated frost-covered walls and revealed how fragile the cabin was inside. The windows rattled loudly against powerful gusts that made the glass tremble in its frame. Each gust carried a faint whisper or distant howl, secrets from the dark woods carried by wind. Her gaze flicked to the small window, searching through swirling whiteness, Outside, the visibility reduced to only feet, turning everything into a shifting white mass. She sensed unseen dangers beneath this snowy veil stirred by the raging storm. Her chest tightened with fear and determination as the fragile peace she built felt increasingly threatened by nature's fury. She moved toward the door, gripping the handle tightly, the wind making it groan under pressure. Her knuckles whitened as she pressed her hand against the rough wood, bracing herself. Briefly, she thought about reinforcing the windows, but blankets and furniture already strained them. Her breath fogged up the space, her body curling instinctively as her mind raced with unspoken fears. What if something more sinister was coming? The cold inside deepened, her breathing became shallow, drowned out only by the howling wind that seeped into her bones, awakening long-buried loneliness. The storm whispered of ancient fears, heightening her sense of vulnerability. She lit a small fire in the stove, its weak flicker barely fought off the biting chill that gnawed at her bones. Her eyes fell on a faded photograph on the wall, a reminder of days long past and loved ones left behind in search of solitude. Guilt gnawed at her stomach, as if her solitude had summoned this storm as punishment. She sat trembling on a worn chair, clutching a cooled mug of tea, as the wind's howls grew louder outside. Snow covered everything, erasing footprints and any signs of recent activity. The outside was an endless white void, silent except for the storm. The feeling of being watched lingered, prickling at her neck. Suddenly, a fierce gust rattled the cabin violently, jarring the door and almost breaking the latch. Debbie jumped up quickly, gripping the handle tightly with pounding heart, pressing herself against the door to stay safe. She wondered if the storm might tear the cabin apart or if its walls could hold. Listening carefully, she heard beyond the wind a rhythmic growl. Was it distant wolves or something else? Her mind raced, haunted by unsettling possibilities. She clutched the latch, resisting the door's push. As hours went by, the storm's fluctuating intensity blurred the line between safety and danger outside, while Debbie's thoughts shifted between hope and fear. The blizzard concealed the world beyond, but revealed her inner vulnerability, her loneliness, doubts, and courage. Amidst chaos, a hidden truth was just out of reach. Suddenly, a faint rhythmic sound broke through the distant thumping of something alive in the frozen woods. Her heart raced. The storm had masked everything, but also uncovered her fragile state. The night remained uncertain. Her isolated shelter hid something stirring, potentially dangerous. Debbie grasped her lantern tightly, instinctively preparing for what might come next. Believing she couldn't avoid it, only stand firm and hope the storm's fury would end before whatever lurked in the dark found its way inside. Morning dawned over the snowy branches, casting a faint light over the silent landscape. The storm had passed overnight, leaving uneven drifts and broken twigs scattered around. Debbie sat by her cabin window, watching the untouched snow where fresh, deliberate footprints had appeared in the whiteness. She held a hot cup of tea, tense after the night's unease, studying the trail closely. The narrow prints showed a cautious but determined creature's passage into the forest. No signs of a larger predator, no dragging marks or struggle, just purposeful movement. Her pup stirred quietly beside her, eyes tired and half closed. Debbie's gaze softened at the fragile animal. Despite chilling tremors, it was alive, her small spark of hope. A gust rattled the cabin walls, swirling snow outside. She hesitated, then stood slowly, joints stiff from cold. The tracks called to her, and despite doubts, she felt quiet determination grow. She grabbed her worn coat and sturdy boots, then picked up her flashlight, flickering with cold, and a small sharp stick, more tool than weapon, but enough to stay alert. She stepped outside, paused briefly, inhaled the cold, icy air, and tasted frost on her tongue. Her feet softly crunched the snow as she headed toward the trail, noting differences in footprints, depth, and spacing. Most snow was untouched, but disturbed where paws pressed, down pressed, broken, or smeared with powder. Her senses heightened as she tracked the trail. Every sound, the crack of a branch, wind's whisper, became clearer. Shadows flickered at vision's edge. Trees stood motionless like silent guards, watching her progress in unnerving stillness. The footprints led into a hollow before sharply turning left into thick undergrowth. Crouching down, Debbie studied fresh impressions. The trail vanished under a fallen branch, then reappeared beyond it, suggesting the creature leapt over it effortlessly. A primal earthy scent filled the cold air, wild and unmistakably animalistic. She inhaled deeply, trying to identify its source: wolf, fox, or something more unpredictable. A chilling thought made her spine tingle as her eyes darted toward the thicker, darker trees where shadows seemed to pulse subtly. She clenched her stick tightly, feeling its rough texture bite her palm. She instinctively froze, senses heightened as she scanned the shadows around her. Although nothing was visible, her skin tingled with unseen eyes watching. A faint rustling from the right mate or turn sharply and hold her breath, listening closely for it to vanish with only the wind remaining. Clutching her stick tighter, she hesitated between following the disturbed snow toward the thicket or retreating, driven by curiosity and caution. An instinct beyond reason pushed her forward to see further into the woods. She carefully stepped over a fallen branch, eyes on the trail ahead as shadows grew thicker and darker. The primal scent hinted at something fierce nearby. Suddenly, a distant howl broke the silence, sharp and unnatural, causing Debbie's heart to race, as she briefly pressed her hand to her chest before calming her breath, realizing she was no longer alone here. Her gaze stayed on the trail and the shifting shadows, determined to follow despite fears whispering inside her. Debbie's mind raced. Was it hope or a warning? She knew she had to choose quickly. The trail took her toward unfamiliar territory with stakes higher than ever. Shadows pulsed with life, and unseen eyes seemed to follow her every move. Her instincts told her to retreat, but curiosity and desperation pushed her forward. She was chasing answers about the creature herself and hidden secrets, no longer just following footprints. Her steps grew cautious as she listened for every sound or movement. A deep growl broke the forest silence, primal and real. Debbie's breath caught. She tightened her grip on the stick, ready for what awaited in darkness. The path led into a thicker area where trees formed a natural barrier. She paused and listened again. The growl was closer now. With her heart pounding, she remained focused, too far to turn back now. Beyond the trees, a faint flickering light suggested a campfire or signs of life nearby. Debbie was determined to follow the trail to its source, risking everything to uncover hidden secrets in the shadows. She moved steadily, her figure swallowed by darkness, senses alert. Somewhere in the forest depths, something silently watched her, waiting patiently. Suddenly slipping on icy snow, she fell hard onto the cold ground, pain shot through her thigh. Her body spasmed as she clutched her injury, trying to call for help with trembling fingers. Shadows flickered around her as panic set in amid the freezing cold, pressing against her skin. Her chest heaved as she tried to steady her trembling voice, helpless from leg pain. "Help," she whispered fearfully, lost in the snowy silence. She pressed her hands into the cold ground, attempting to stand, but pain held her down. Her muscles refused to move, feeling heavy and rooted. Tears threatened as frustration overwhelmed her, her mind clouded with pain and despair. Shadows stretched like claws under the moonlight, closing in around her. The wind carried a relentless chill that made her shiver despite warm clothes. Her trembling fingers clawed at the snow, every move worsened the agony. She cried out softly, raw and desperate, echoing through the silent woods. Her head dropped onto the icy ground as she stared at the dark sky above. Seconds dragged painfully as her thoughts drifted to her cabin, so near yet out of reach. A cold tear slid down her cheek, blending with the snow dusted across her face. Her body remained unresponsive, and despair threatened to consume her entirely. Out of nowhere, faint sounds broke the silence, branches cracking under snow and a soft rustle nearby. Her eyes flicked around frantically, seeking shadows. Dull with pain, her mind struggled to concentrate. She grasped her side desperately, trembling as she tried to call out again with a barely audible voice. Only the quiet forest answered back. Shallow breaths became uneven, and her eyelids fluttered with exhaustion. Yet amid the fog, a faint awareness emerged. She had to stay alert and hold on to life. Snow kept falling softly, covering her in whiteness as her body sank into cold, immobilizing despair. Darkness crept into her vision's edges again, but beneath the pain and fear flickered a fragile will to fight. She clenched her fists and summoned what little strength remained. Her lips formed a hoarse whisper, "Help, someone, please." The words vanished into the vast woods unanswered. As consciousness faded, she clung to one thought: she must survive and be found before the cold or darkness claimed her forever. Snow continued to fall, cloaking her in icy silence. As her body grew colder, hope flickered faintly, fragile and dying. Suddenly, her senses alerted her to a subtle sound, a branch cracking or distant movement that made her freeze in place. Her eyes darted randomly, seeking threats in the shadows, while her exhausted mind struggled to interpret what she heard. Instinctively, her trembling hand pressed against her side, clutching her wounded thigh to slow the bleeding or numbness. Calling out again, her voice barely a whisper due to dry, raw throat, was met with thick silence broken only by whine through trees. Her eyelids fluttered and breathing slowed as she realized she couldn't stay conscious much longer, strength waning, vision dimming. The cold penetrated deeply, threatening total surrender. Desperately fighting to stay alert and awake, knowing that giving up meant death, her eyes caught a brief movement behind the trees, maybe a shadow or figure, and adrenaline surged through her veins despite agony. Was it a rescue, an animal, or something more sinister? She couldn't tell, but hoped help was nearby. She clung to her side, fighting the trembling overtaking her. Her barely audible voice again called out, "Help, please." As her words faded into the cold air, her eyelids fluttered shut. When she opened them, shadows seemed to creep closer and darker. The relentless snow blanketed everything in silence and white. Her body grew colder, muscles numb, awareness flickering like a dying flame. Yet amidst her fading consciousness, she realized she was utterly alone and desperately needed rescue. That thought weighed heavier than pain or cold. Suddenly, a faint warmth touched her cheek, an almost unnoticeable contact. Her eyes opened slightly to see a dark figure moving silently through the trees against the snow. Her heart leapt with a small hope perhaps this was a rescuer. Or an enemy. Her mind, foggy and fragile, fought to decide. In her last clear moments, she gathered her remaining strength to whisper shakily, "Please, don't leave me." The figure approached, snow softly crunching beneath their steps. Her vision blurred entirely. The last thing she saw was the faint outline of a face leaning over her, voice muffled but recognizable. As darkness overtook her, Debbie's awareness faded into the cold wilderness. Still, a tiny hope flickered deep inside an ember in the endless winter night. The forest was shrouded in darkness. Only the pale glow of the moon pierced through the thick canopy, casting shifting shadows on the snow below. Debbie pressed her back against a rough fallen log's bark, clutching her sharpened spear carved from a broken branch tighter. Her chest heaved in shallow, irregular breaths, each inhale painful as she strained to listen. The cold penetrated her bones, numbing her fingers, but her attention remained fixed on every rustle and crack from the brush beyond her hiding spot. Heavy footsteps crunched deliberately through the snow with purpose. Low growls vibrated through the silent woods, making her skin crawl. She sensed primal tracking, the faint tremors of hunters nearby. Her knuckles whitened around her spear as she scanned anxiously for movement, any sign of attack. A sudden gust carried a strong smell of damp fur and musk toward, or like a warning. Her stomach clenched as she realized these weren't ordinary wolves. They had drawn closer, sensing her presence and vulnerability. She froze, blending into shadows with barely a breath, trying to stay unseen. The snarling intensified, punctuated by sharp barks as their tense muscles and ears flicked around her hidden spot. She strained to catch movement patterns, but only heard relentless paw beats on snow, like a heartbeat matching her growing fear. Time stretched endlessly as she crouched, muscles tight and heart pounding painfully. Every sound threatened her. Staying hidden was vital. Rushing out meant death. Waiting risked exhaustion or discovery. A sudden wind shift carried a sharper scent closer. More urgent, the wolves tracking her trail with tireless noses. In the darkness, faint glints of eyes reflected moonlight as they observed and tested or resolved. Their patience waned, growls and sniffing grew more aggressive. Her grip on the spear tightened further. Her fingertips numb from cold, but her resolve remained strong. She faced dangers alone, and this was no different. She had to choose between hiding or risking everything with a reckless escape. A deep growl from one wolf broke the silence, prompting snarls and flashing teeth as they debated attack or wait. The tense atmosphere felt suffocating as Debbie remembered her cabin's safety. If she could reach it, though rushing was too risky. Her heartbeat quickened, but patience was her best tool. She slowly shifted, pressing against the bark, eyes on the gap among trees, planning her move in silence. A gust of wind revealed her scent once more to the pack. The wolves' ears flattened as they noticed her, their eyes narrowing sharply. One barked loudly, alerting the others, and they all froze. Debbie's chest heaved painfully. Her instincts urged her to run, but her body stayed still. She held her breath, muscles coiled tightly, waiting silently. She saw a faint wolf's head watching her with bright, patient eyes. The alpha growled deeply, commanding attention. Suddenly, the pack melted into the shadows and vanished into the woods. Debbie exhaled in relief, trembling with adrenaline. She remained crouched momentarily, listening to distant footsteps and snarls. Carefully, she moved away quietly, disappearing into the trees while watching her path ahead. The moment was brief, a warning that danger still lurked in the dark forest late at night. She needed to reach her cabin, secure herself, and prevent the wolves' visit from turning deadly. Moving silently through the snow, she focused despite the cold sting, driven by determination rather than fear. Her territory was under threat, and she would do whatever it took to survive and understand what the wolves' presence signified for her future. Deeper in the woods, she saw they patrolled beyond prey, possibly linked to a greater danger nearby. Her knowledge grew, fueling her resolve to confront any threat alone if needed. That night transformed her. She was no longer just a survivor, but becoming a predator, reading shadows and anticipating risks ahead. Cold wind bit at Debbie as she lay pressed against sticky snow, senses strained, numbness from injury, and cold engulfed her muscles, aching with each breath. Shadows surrounded her until faint light from a distant headlamp signaled search party progress, both hope and danger nearby. Her wounded side throbbed painfully, but her ears stayed sharp, listening for any movement. She knew silence was crucial. Even small shifts could reveal her location. A sudden gust shifted the scent and carried the faint crackle of dry twigs. Debbie's heart pounded as distant footsteps grew louder on the snow. Clutching her worn hunting knife tightly, she felt exposed, yet had no other choice, her only hope against encroaching danger. As the searchers neared with careful steps, Debbie scanned for an escape or hidden spot. The icy snow made movement risky, forcing her to weigh her options, signal, or stay silent. Her injury limited her choices, but instinct pushed her to act. She shifted slightly without noise and whispered hoarsely into the cold night, "Help." Over here, voice shaky but firm. Repeating louder, she pressed her lips tight, aiming at the approaching figures. Sound briefly echoed through the silent forest before vanishing into darkness. Debbie's heartbeat quickened. "We found you." Her hope surged as tears threatened to freeze on her cheeks, but she clenched her jaw. The rescue was close, the team was nearby. Her fingers gripped the knife instinctively, not to threaten. Each step brought her nearer to safety, though her caution stayed high. Shadows lingered, and danger hadn't disappeared entirely. Finally, the flashlight lit up her partly buried body, arms and legs tangled but alive. A man's voice ordered firmly, "Stay still, we're right here." Several boots encircled her, one bent to check injuries, another shined a light into her face. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting a compassionate yet focused rescuer's gaze. Relief flooded her, but some tension still remained. The wolves might return at any moment, leaving her vulnerable after her injuries. She held on to the faint hope that the danger had passed for now. As the team carefully helped her sit, Debbie saw the dark forest behind them, quiet once again. Though the threat was temporarily gone, she understood shadows still lurked beneath her fragile peace. Her injuries, the cold, and an uncertain future weighed on her mind. The rescue changed her situation. She was no longer hidden or helpless, but her journey continued. Her awareness of dangers deepened, and she realized survival depended on her resilience and vigilance. The cold wind whispered through the trees, but warmth grew in her chest from her rescuer's presence. a new feeling flickered determination. Shadows might always threaten her, but she had begun to face them. Her fragile hope strengthened into resolve to survive, trust, and find a way out of darkness. As they moved her away from the icy ground, Debbie's eyes stayed on the forest behind them. She watched silently, now understanding that her fight was internal as well as outside threats. The forest shadows lingered, but her inner strength grew, untouched by darkness. Debbie was carried to safety, battered but subtly changed, realizing her resilience. No longer a victim hiding in shadows, she was a survivor reclaiming power amid winter's cold woods. The wind tore through the damaged vehicle as snow streaked past, her fingers clutching the seat and breath fogging the glass while she glanced at the rearview mirror. Shadows of pines flickered against swirling snow, distant wolf howls reminded her of lurking dangers beyond sight. The engine groaned through the snow-covered road, each jolt emphasizing her vulnerability as icy dread seeped in through the cracks. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the retreating forest, but her mind clung to the haunting sounds, the snarls, silence, and primal tension from before. A shiver ran down her spine as she recalled the wolf's piercing eyes focused calculating, relentless that had watched her leave, measuring her weakness. Her stomach clenched not from cold, but from the lingering certainty that the forest wasn't finished with her yet. The storm's howling masked faint rustling branches or something else unseen slipping away into shadows. The tires hissed over ice as Debbie instinctively held tighter to her seatbelt. Her fingers trembled not only from cold. She'd escaped, but relief felt bitter. How soon would the forest's secrets catch up again? How many dangers lurked beyond perception beneath snow or darkness? She knew woods swallow silence and hide threats in their depths until they strike. Glancing at the snow-covered landscape rushing past, she saw distorted trees blurred by the storm, yet detected faint jagged marks, her hurried trail partially hidden by fresh snowfall. She wondered if the wolf pack had moved on or still watched in shadows like a scar on winter's frozen wilderness. Suddenly, a jolt caused the vehicle to lurch forward again. Debbie gasped, her stomach twisting as she pressed her forehead more firmly against the cold glass. Dizziness threatened to overtake her, but she fought it, clutching her injured leg beneath her layers of clothing. The dull ache from her fall persisted, now intensifying with a sharp, persistent pain. Her hand instinctively pressed to her thigh, feeling the tight bandage beneath her glove a fragile shield against the pain. The storm's fury made every movement uncertain, each jolt threatened her fragile stability. Faint echoes of growls still haunted her mind, a constant reminder that safety was not yet hers. Her thoughts raced. What if the wolves tracked her? Could they sense her fear and vulnerability? Would they attack again, or had the storm scattered them into darkness? She hoped snow and wind had driven them away, her pursuers lost for now yet trusted only cautious instincts in this unpredictable forest. Her fingers brushed the battered radio in her coat pocket. She hesitated, knowing whether interference might block signals but clinging to hope of help. She understood the storm could drown out any transmission but refused to abandon the device entirely. The relentless snowstorm raged on unforgivingly. Visibility was now only a few feet, with chaos swirling outside. Shadows flickered near her vision, threats or illusions lurking beyond the snow. Her eyes shifted between the road and mirror, seeking signs of pursuit as her breath quickened. Suddenly, the car hit a deep rut and Debbie gasped again, fighting dizziness as her stomach lurched. The storm's fury made or feel small against the wilderness, yet a spark of determination ignited within. She had survived wolves, falls, cold-faced darkness, and escaped, if only temporarily. Glancing at our reflection showed a pale, tense face with wide eyes full of exhaustion and resolve. The wolf's haunting stare still haunted her mind, but she refused to fear. Deep inside, she was stubborn. She wouldn't let the forest claim her without a fight. As the car sank into another snowdrift, Debbie gripped the seat tighter. The storm and her journey into the unknown continued relentless. She knew her ordeal wasn't over. The woods still held their secrets beneath the swirling snow. The endless night ahead was dangerous, but she had one goal: to reach safety in this frozen wilderness. A faint, distant howl pierced the storm's roar, a chilling sound that cut through the chaos. Her heartbeat quickened. Was it another pack or something else? She couldn't tell, but it heightened her unease. Her eyes flicked to the dark horizon again, searching and listening. Then, in the silence afterward, she realized her escape was only temporary. The forest hold remained, shadows ready to consume her once more. She braced herself against fear, knowing what lay ahead would test her strength and instincts. The vehicle moved forward as snow blurred the landscape into a swirling white infinity. Debbie's thoughts stayed on the wolves watching and waiting, while her body acted on primal instinct to survive. The night stretched endlessly before her, but inside, a small spark of hope burned, a stubborn light refusing to go out. The distant town hum gradually faded as Debbie pressed her forehead to the cold window glass. Outside, snow-covered mountains extended into the gray horizon with misty peaks beneath silent clouds. The world she knew seemed distant, like echoes of chaos and danger she had just escaped. Now, only the soft hum of her small apartment and faint fire crackle filled the room, yet her mind wouldn't rest. She stared at the icy landscape, thoughts swirling like the wind outside. The wolves, those sharp eyes and primal howls, remained vivid in her memory, haunting her with their raw presence. She recalled moments in the forest, the decision to stay, hesitation, instinct to flee. Realizing she almost lost, everything gnawed at her, stirring a restless ache inside. Her fingers shook as she reached for tea, warmth contrasting with lingering cold. Guilt prickled her skin. Was she reckless or just stubborn? The forest tested her limits, forcing her to face long-suppressed vulnerabilities. Yet amid fear, a spark of resolve ignited. She couldn't stay away forever. Her bond with that wild land was too deep to ignore. Her connection to the wilderness was now more than curiosity, it was a duty. She shifted position and looked at a worn map pinned on the wall. Faint markings on her map indicated her territory and past visits. She traced routes, imagining new paths to explore. The decision was clear: she would return, not out of reckless curiosity, but because her role as guardian had become crucial. The ecosystem relied on her presence, her knowledge, and protection. Taking a deep breath, she calmed herself, aware of the dangers. The forest was now more dangerous. Her absence could leave injured animals vulnerable and the environment more exposed. She understood her presence acted as a shield. Without her, threats like humans, predators, or hidden dangers could thrive. She gathered supplies: warm clothes, a flashlight, a sturdy knife, a small first aid kit with careful intent. As she prepared, questions filled her mind. Would the wolves still be watching? Had she disturbed the wood's delicate balance? Or had she made some unseen difference? The doubt weighed heavily like the winter sky outside, oppressive and dark. Despite it being late evening, sleep still wouldn't come. She thought about the wolf pup she rescued, so fragile and dependent, wondered if it had made it through the storm and was safe now. The image of its trembling body, eyes filled with fear, stayed with her. That small life rekindled her purpose, fueling her desire to go back not just to observe, but to protect. Debbie paused at her door briefly, listening carefully. The town was silent, no sirens or distant voices, just the whispering whine through empty streets. Snow crunched softly under her boots as she headed toward her car parked in a shadowed alley. Although old, the vehicle was reliable, her faithful partner on solitary trips. She brushed snow off the windshield, started the engine, and felt warmth from the heater as it sputtered alive in the cold night. Leaving the town behind, shadows swallowed the lights into darkness under a snow-covered sky. The road twisted through frozen land. Each mile brought her closer to the familiar forest. Her hands grasped the wheel tightly, tense and alert. Every movement outside the shadows seemed sharper in her heightened senses. Her mind drifted back to the wolves' fierce, mysterious predators. She recalled their howls and how they changed the wood's atmosphere. Her bond with them was complicated, fear mixed with awe. Could she truly understand them, or was her compassion a weakness to be exploited? Questions raced in her head, but she trusted her instincts more than ever. Approaching the forest's edge, the trees grew darker and denser, their branches like claws reaching into the night. The snow was deeper and untouched, except for her footprints marking her return. She slowed her car, carefully watching the shadows as her breath formed icy clouds. Suddenly, a quick movement caught her eye, a shadow slipping behind pine trees. Her heart pounded, yet her hands remained steady. Maybe it was just a fox or wind or something else. Still, her senses sharpened. She grabbed her binoculars and stared into the darkness. The figure moved too fast to recognize clearly, but she still felt watched. She parked behind thick bushes and stepped out into the snow. The night was still, with only leaves whispering and a distant bird calling. Debbie moved carefully, eyes darting through shadows, muscles tense. The forest showed signs of life, rabbits running, an owl's hoot far away, ice cracking underfoot. Her gaze searched the darkness, senses heightened. She pulled her coat tighter as her breath froze in the cold air. The burden of her choice weighed on her shoulders, returning to protect and reconnect with this wilderness. Doubts yet persisted. Would she bring peace or cause more trouble? Could she trust the fragile bond she sought to rebuild? A distant howl broke the silence sharply, calling and warning. Debbie stopped suddenly, listening closely. The sound confirmed her decision. She was part of this world now, woven into its unpredictable nature. Her future depended on walking the fine line between human and beast, guardian and outsider. She turned towards her car, determined in her mind. The night ahead was filled with shadows and secrets. She slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. Her choice clear: to return to the forest, stronger and wiser. The wolf's gaze lurking dangers, her guilt and hope all fused into one goal. The engine hummed as she drove into darkness, leaving the town behind and heading into wilderness. Mountains stood silent, watching over her journey. Deep inside, a quiet voice told her she was now part of this land's delicate balance. She would protect it at all costs. Debbie's breath fogged in the cold morning air as she stepped onto snow-covered ground outside her cabin. The forest was still, almost silent, except for melting ice drip and distant branch groans from warming sun. Her eyes scanned for recent signs of activity amid the clearing. The smell of thawing snow mixed with damp pine and decomposing leaves, anchoring her in the moment. She moved carefully, boots softly pressing on icy crust with deliberate steps. Her focus stayed on the ground where narrow paw prints pressed into white powder fresh, but calm tracks indicating an animal had paused, sensing her presence. Debbie knelt, clearing away a thin snow layer with shaky fingers, her eyes narrowing at the tracks, which led deeper into the dense forest weaving between roots and fallen limbs. A faint musky scent in the breeze, wet fur, or a creature passing through made her inhale sharply. Recognizing it from before, she noticed today's scent was subdued, less urgent. The animal seemed hesitant or curious rather than fleeing. Maybe it sensed her presence and decided to stay still, watching from afar. This raised cautious hope that danger might be easing. Her hand rested on her backpack strap where a small stick was tucked, useful for self-defense if needed, but not enough for a fight with a wolf. She looked around warily, senses heightened as trees swayed gently with melting snow and sunlight broke through clouds, shadows flickering silently. The forest felt calm but uncertain, an uneasy quiet rather than threat. Suddenly, movement among the trees, a quick shadow caught her eye. She froze, muscles tight and alert, every nerve strained. Deeper in the woods, a branch broke, breaking the silence. She tensed, then relaxed as silence returned. She straightened, her eyes fixed on the trail ahead, staying alert in the uncertain forest. Her grip tightened on her backpack strap, feeling reassured. She chose to explore the trail further, not out of reckless curiosity, but driven by duty. If the creature was wounded or tired nearby, it needed her now more than ever. Helping it might give her a new sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Her gaze stayed fixed on faint footprints fading into the bushes as she moved forward. The forest's quiet acceptance sparked a glimmer of hope, a sign that life persisted despite shadows. No longer just an outsider, she felt part of this fragile awakening world. Whatever awaited ahead, she was ready, focused, and determined. Deeper into the woods, the trail led her, where trees thickened and light dimmed. Debbie sensed a shift, her understanding of the forest and herself expanding, signs of recent activity, blending with her resolve into a new story. She was no longer avoiding threats. She accepted her place in this ecosystem, prepared for whatever came: danger, discovery, or connection. Reaching a small clearing, she saw fresh signs: a broken twig, a faint scrape on a tree, disturbed earth, and felt her heart race, not with fear, but renewed purpose. The creature might still be nearby, injured or hiding, waiting for help or simply watching her. Her choice to follow the trail changed everything. She now realized her actions could impact the outcome. The forest shifted from silent danger to delicate opportunity. Debbie knelt, studying the ground carefully, noticing faint snow disturbances leading into a thicket. Her senses heightened, she moved quietly, hoping to find the creature alive, cautious but strong. She understood her next step might be vital for both the animal and her understanding of this wilderness and herself. As she advanced, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her move. Shadows flickered, leaves rustled softly, and life's scent grew stronger. Debbie felt a calm determination. Her journey was just beginning, and her choices would shape her future path. With each step into uncertainty, she prepared for whatever lay ahead. Leaning against a pine's rough trunk, she steadied her breath and listened intently. The shadows danced under moonlight as distant wolf calls echoed through the trees. Flickering shapes across the snow seemed almost alive. Her eyes darted from movement to movement, muscles tense with anticipation, while cold bit through her clothing layers, yet her focus never wavered. Every rustle of branches and faint snow shifts amplified in the tense silence. She had long learned that forest whispers could hide danger or secrets, and tonight she needed to interpret them carefully. Her hand instinctively grasped her battered spear, the only trusted weapon, and she tightened her grip. The howl sounded again, closer and more urgent. A shiver ran down her spine, but she kept her breathing steady, resisting panic. She recalled past encounters, moments of peril when patience and observation saved her. No rushing or reckless actions, only quiet vigilance. Suddenly, her sharp eyes caught movement behind snow-covered branches. She froze and narrowed her eyes to analyze. Shadows shifted cautiously, tentative yet purposeful, testing whether she was a threat or blending into the landscape. Her heartbeat quickened, but she forced deep breaths and remained still. Moonlight outlined the forest contours, silver patches lit the snow and trees' outlines. Then she saw them, two glowing amber eyes blinking softly before vanishing behind trees, filling her with cautious hope and fear. Was this the same wolf she sensed earlier, or a more unpredictable, dangerous creature? Her eyes fell to new paw prints in the snow leading toward her hideout. The tracks were fresh and unmarked, suggesting recent activity. She considered her options: stay hidden or follow the trail to understand what was happening in this fragile night world. A breeze moved the branches, carrying a primal scent of frost, pine, and something deeper, more instinctual. Her nose twitched involuntarily. Predators might be nearby, watching from shadows. She tightened her grip on the spear, but held still to avoid detection. A faint rustling behind her broke the silence. Her muscles tensed as her heart beat faster. She kept her head steady, knowing movement could reveal her position. She paid attention to the subtle sounds, the faint shuffle of snow and the barely audible crack of branches. While minutes felt endless, the forest held its breath, silence pressing in around her. Every breath and heartbeat was deliberate as she remembered moments of vulnerability, times when fear nearly overtook her, and when patience protected her. Suddenly, a softer, more melodic howl broke the quiet, like an invitation rather than a warning. Debbie's eyes reflected longing and understanding. Despite her caution, she sensed a kinship with this creature, shared solitude and strength. A shadow moved from the darkness toward her hiding place, making her breathe quicken and grip her spear tightly. The wolf's slow, cautious approach was neither menacing nor fleeing under the moonlight. Their eyes briefly locked, a silent acknowledgement amid shadows. Debbie held her breath, unsure if the wolf sensed her intent or simply acknowledged her presence. It paused nearby, sniffed the air, then curled up on the snow with its tail around its paws. Relief washed over her, knowing this moment of peace was fragile amid a dangerous landscape. Silence filled the night as they observed each other silently. Debbie understood she couldn't stay forever, but glimpsed a delicate harmony born of patience and acceptance. When the wolf softly purred and lifted its head, she felt a change within, fears of loneliness and loss, fading into quiet conviction. She belonged here, part of this wilderness governed by unspoken rules. Shadows flickered once more before vanishing into darkness as the wolf left into the night. Debbie listened to its fading call, feeling her decision settle deep inside, realizing she was no longer an outsider, but part of this unpredictable forest world under the rising moon's glow. Debbie exhaled softly, a gentle smile on her lips as she embraced this new phase of her journey filled with trust and patience. A small stream nearby babbled cheerfully as its waters float over age-worn smooth stones. She knelt to study a patch of lush, vibrant moss thriving in the shaded dampness. Closing her eyes briefly, she allowed the peacefulness to fill her, grounding her in nature's resilient rhythm. A sudden rustling broke the silence. She instinctively turned and scanned the underbrush, where a nervous squirrel scurried across fallen leaves, clutching bits of bark and buds. Debbie softly smiled at this lively moment, a reminder of life's delicate balance here and the land awakening from winter sleep. Her gaze lifted to the canopy of emerging green leaves above the sky, tinged with pale blue, and she felt the sun's warmth on her face, filling her with renewed energy. Breathing in deeply, she sensed her worries fading, replaced by a quiet certainty that her place was indeed among these waking woods, part of nature's endless cycle of renewal. A soft, purposeful sound caught her attention once more. She turned toward a cluster of young saplings, where a subtle movement flickered at the edge of her sight. Her hand instinctively went into her pocket, fingers closing around a small worn pendant she always carried, an old symbol of luck and comfort. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but from renewed determination. She moved nearer, narrowing her eyes to better see the faint shape among the trees. Approaching closer, she identified it as a deer with dappled fur blending into the greenery. The animal paused, ears twitching, aware of her presence but not fleeing. Debbie stood still, watching it graze quietly on fresh shoots. Gratitude overwhelmed her, this delicate moment of harmony, proof that life endured despite hardships. She softly whispered, "You're safe here." The deer lifted its head and met our gaze with gentle caution. For a moment, they shared a silent understanding, an unspoken bond formed through mutual recognition. Debbie's shoulders relaxed as past fears faded into forest peace. She slowly reached out her hand, silently promising reassurance. The deer took a delicate step forward, sniffed the air briefly, then resumed feeding. This quiet exchange changed her view as forest sounds deepened, chirping insects, a distant hawk, rippling water affirming her bond and sense of rebirth. She realized she could no longer be detached. The land had become part of her soul, a sanctuary to protect. Her eyes scanned the clearing, noticing new growth buds on shrubs, shoots through soil, wildflowers emerging from leaves. A new longing arose to nurture and guard what is fragile and vital. The forest awakening gave her purpose. She saw herself shifting from observer to active participant. A breeze stirred leaves and carried sweet scents of blossoms and earth. Debbie closed her eyes briefly, immersing in the moment's feel. She understood her duty now extended beyond watching. It was about becoming part of this cycle. Her fingers touched the pendant again, a steadying reminder of her commitment. At that instant, she made a firm decision: she would stay. The wilderness captured her soul, and she refused to leave it behind. Once solitary and cautious, her life was now becoming part of this land's renewal. She moved slowly, unseen, watching the forest respond in kind. As sunlight rose higher and cast longer shadows, Debbie felt deep acceptance. No longer just surviving here, she was becoming part of its story. Though the future was uncertain, she knew her place was among the awakening trees and singing birds embracing renewal and hope. Suddenly, a distant crack sounded through the trees. Debbie's gaze immediately shifted toward it. A fallen branch had shifted under new growth, revealing disturbed earth nearby. Her instincts kicked in. She approached carefully, noticing fresh claw marks, ripped leaves. Something or someone had recently passed through a predator or newcomer, perhaps. She paused to study the trail more closely, identifying a faint paw print larger than a fox's, but smaller than a wolf's. An unfamiliar scent reached her nose, sharper and more pungent than usual forest aromas. Her heartbeat quickened not from fear, but a heightened sense of awareness. She realized the forest's quiet awakening might be disrupted sooner than expected. Her earlier hope now mixed with cautious vigilance. Holding her pendant tightly, Debbie chose to follow the trail discreetly through the undergrowth. Her aim was no longer mere observation, but understanding. She had to discover what or who had entered her sanctuary. As she moved forward, she reflected on her new role: protector, observer, and possibly mediator between the land and any emerging threat or opportunity. The trail led her into a denser part of the woods, where shadows grew thicker and light dimmer. She hid behind a bush, watching the gloom. A faint movement caught her eye, something small and wary, perhaps an animal hiding from disturbance. Her thoughts raced. Was this danger or an opportunity for alliance? She hesitated briefly before stepping into the shadows, prepared for whatever was coming. In this uncertain moment, Debbie's determination strengthened. She knew her journey was far from over. The forest rebirth depended on her too. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with quiet strength that had carried her through winter's darkness. The land began healing, and so would she, steadfast, alert, and committed to renewal's ongoing story.